it's been a grim week. And then when it comes to Israel Palestine, and then I think back on like a year ago and all the things that we have already learned and known, and you just like the traumatized part of oneself kind of buries the things that, you know, we forgot about, the stories and the horrors. But this week has been really rough when it comes to Gaza. We know that, I mean, before I get into what's been happening, I guess I just want you to introduce yourself. Please introduce yourself to the audience. Who are you? Why do you report on this?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm Jasper Nathaniel.
Hi, Jasper.
Thank you. My beat is mostly the West Bank, actually, which I have been reporting for a number of years. And I really started focusing on it after October 7th because it was just so clear to me that nobody was going to be paying attention to what was happening there. And at the same time, the settlers and the settlers who run the government in Israel were going to use that shadow cast over it as an opportunity to steal more land, kill more Palestinians. And so I just basically decided, okay, I'm going to just focus on this and shout from the rooftops and try to get people to pay attention. And to be frank, it's only been worse than I could have imagined. All of my grimmest predictions have come true and then some, and I'm very worried about what's happening in the West Bank, to say nothing of the genocide in Gaza. Had
you visited the West Bank, and you said you started reporting on this years ago, but had you visited before October 7th?
No, okay. I never had been before. And I'd never been to Israel either. I mean, I'm Jewish. I was raised Jewish, not in a Zionist household. And I became interested in, Palestine, anti-Zionism in college, like a lot of people. And then just gradually became more sort of invested in it, and then started writing about it a couple of years ago.
That's awesome. And your writing is excellent. And I did want to ask you about what it's been like in the West Bank. Just this week, an Israeli settler who had been known to be violent and extremist and all of this actually murdered one of the filmmakers and activists who worked on No Other Land, which is that documentary that won the Oscar, Awdah Hathaleen. Anyway, and yeah, he's just the latest person to be murdered. Obviously, Sayfollah Musallet kind of made headlines. He's the American Palestinian who was killed also by settlers or prevented from getting aid when he could have been saved for hours, was not attended to after and succumbed to his injuries. These are just two examples, but can you tell me where you've been, what you've seen, and why you think it's getting worse?
Yeah. But before I forget, I just want to mention that Sayfollah Musallet, his first cousin, his mother's sister's 15 or 16-year-old child, is currently locked up in Israeli military detention. He's been since February on charges of throwing stones. He's contracted a severe case of scabies. He's lost at least 26 pounds. He's not been able to speak with his parents since February, and he has no trial date scheduled. So he's just sort of locked up indefinitely now. And the reason I bring that up is A, because it's just important we talk about these things, but B, because like that story of, this is an American kid, a Palestinian American. If a story like that is not covered by the media, just imagine how much is happening in the West Bank that we have no idea about. To get to your question though, I mean, the first thing that I think people should just understand is that there was a fundamental change in the way the West Bank is governed that actually happened before October 7th. That happened in February of 2023 when Smotrich, who's the finance minister, and basically, I think as a lot of people know, him along with some other far-right members of the Knesset became unbelievably powerful because Netanyahu was relying on them to hold this governing coalition together.
Right.
So Smotrich, who is a true extremist in every sense of the word, he's been charged on support for terrorism. He was one of those kids that you see in videos running around the hills, throwing rocks, setting outposts. So he works out a deal with the defense minister, who at the time was Yoav Gallant. And what the deal did was he basically, Smotrich installed himself inside the Defense Department And then he created a essentially shadow government to govern the West Bank, made up entirely of settlers. And the reason that's important is because the West Bank actually has legal standing as being under a military occupation.
Yeah.
The military occupation is brutal and it's cruel and it's sadistic, but in a strange way, the military's sort of agenda is not necessarily completely aligned with a lot of these extremist settlers who have their own ideological commitments around taking the land, as opposed to just necessarily brutalizing people and, and having control over everything. And in fact, there have been lots of times in the past when the settlers and the Israeli military, their agendas have clashed directly.
Interesting. And also kind of like tracks historically with how Zionism formed. Anyway, but keep going.
Yeah.
Because I was always under the impression that the military sort of low-key supported and defended and protected settlers, but you're saying no, they've even been the targets.
Well, I don't want to overstate it. I mean, the military certainly always has the settlers' back over the Palestinians. But just to give you like a concrete example, there's something called outposts. An outpost is basically when a group of settlers peels off from a settlement that is formally recognized by Israel, and they build something that has not been approved by Israel, meaning it has not gone through these sort of bureaucratic procedures to get approval for it. And they do that to steal land. They go and build outposts like right next to Palestinian villages. They take their farmland. They have their livestock graze on their land. There was a time when that causes enormous problems. Basically, I mean, it causes chaos. Mm-hmm. And the military doesn't want chaos. Right. Like they want to maintain order. And again, like they want to crack skulls, but I think it's honestly a pain in the ass for them to have to go deal with these snotty-nosed settler kids who are out there causing trouble all the time. And so now...
And the order, we should just say, is apartheid. The order is checkpoints. The order is already preventing people from getting life-saving medical care because ambulances have to go through checkpoints and all this. The order is already being treated like terrorists. So like, the order is terrible. But yeah, the vigilantism, I think, is what you're talking about. Please continue.
Yeah, no, that's important because again, like I don't want to imply that the military are out there as a benevolent force protecting the Palestinians against the settlers. Like they're enforcing a brutal apartheid system. Smotrich, who again is a settler, he actually was not able to serve in the military because he was charged with supporting terrorism. So what he does is he builds this new chain of command basically inside the Defense Department. And what it does is it routes every decision away from the Defense Department's lawyers. And that's important because these lawyers, they are lawyers, they're bureaucrats. And again, like who knows what their agendas are, but on some level, like they're trying to at least ostensibly, nominally prove that they're following the law. And the law in this case, it's the Geneva Convention, it's Hague, and there's all sorts of laws around military occupation that basically have like created these bureaucratic hurdles for the settlers to be able to build wherever they want, demolish wherever they want. So Smotrich builds a new chain of command that allows every decision to just go right around the military lawyers and right around anybody that would get in the way of making decisions. And what they've done is they've given the settlers the ability to build wherever they want, to demolish wherever they want. They're no longer taking down outposts. They're not enforcing law against settlers. And so, to the extent that there was some sort of like framework of rule there, it's essentially been dismantled by Smotrich. Wow. And so what that actually looks like is, I mean, we hear this term a lot, like the settlers are emboldened, but I mean, that is true in a very technical sense. Because they like, yes, I think they're sort of spiritually emboldened. They recognize that, they're getting away with whatever they want, but like quite literally, laws are not being enforced against them in a way that at one time they at least, pretended to enforce laws against them, if nothing else. They just, all of the things that were in the way before are out of the way, and they're able to just run completely wild. In the case of the shooting recently of Awdah Hathaleen, that is a perfect example, actually, of how not only are the settlers emboldened, but quite literally they're doing their job. When they go and terrorize a Palestinian community, when they shoot somebody and kill them, when they chase people off their land, that is what they're there to do. And Yinon Levy, who's the notoriously violent settler who shot Awdah, I was actually warned about him when I was in the South Hebron Hills. They showed me his picture, the people who I was traveling with, and they basically said, all the settlers are dangerous, or all the hilltop settlers are dangerous. But if you see this guy, just go the other way, because he's psychotic. He's actually psychotic, and he carries a gun with him wherever he goes. People have known this about him for years. I think your audience probably knows that the Biden administration, and one of the only, I think, positive things they did for Palestinians was they sanctioned Yinon Levy and a handful of other settlers, which actually did, I think, put a chill on some of the extremist settlers. Trump comes in, he immediately lifts those sanctions. This past April, just a couple months ago, Smotrich was in the West Bank doing a ceremony at Yinon Levy's illegal outpost, handing out ATVs and military-grade gear, and calling them out the Jewish heroes, the pioneers, quite literally saying, you are on the front lines of expanding the Jewish state. So Yinon Levy was given an ATV by Smotrich when he was already known to be exceptionally violent, after he shoots and kills Awdah Hathaleen 2 weeks ago or so. A number of Knesset members show up in court to support him, and they always use the same language. They call them the Jewish pioneers, because these people are, pioneering new land in the West Bank. And literally the same day that he committed that shooting, Smotrich was back in the West Bank, giving away weapons, military-grade gear, ATVs, night vision goggles, drones. And so it's
funded by American taxpayers.
100%. So it's not enough to say, the rules have been, the guardrails are off and they've been empowered. I mean, quite literally, they have been promoted and given funds and given support and given weapons, and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. The settlers are expanding Israel to cover the occupied West Bank, and they have effectively annexed it at this point.
Right. And this is, I think what's so important and critical about someone like yourself writing about this and visiting is that, for 23 months now, we've been hearing, if only Gaza didn't have Hamas, if only Gaza didn't have Hamas. And the line that I think we've all been saying, and I think it, oh God, I think it bears repeating, but it's just Israel, Gaza without Hamas is the West Bank. Look at what's happening in the West Bank, and the political leadership in the West Bank has been neutered completely. And that's my next question about this is, and look at what's happening. Look at the colonialism, look at the ethnic cleansing, look at the terrorism that is constant. And these are people trying to live their lives, trying to go to work, trying to have a life. What is the political leadership been like in terms of the Palestinian Authority? What's been the response? I mean, I'm not holding my breath, but I'm just curious about or does it feel like every day, is just kind of like a struggle to live, and the idea of thinking about a political route out feels naive. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the Palestinian Authority, which is, the Palestinian group that ostensibly governs parts of the West Bank, which is currently the Fatah party. Most people in the West Bank, most Palestinians call them Israel's subcontractor. They just do Israel's bidding, basically. And I have not met one Palestinian in the West Bank who thinks that the PA or Mahmoud Abbas, who currently is the leader, are going to help free them. I mean, if anything, they are just collaborating directly with Israel. In terms of what the solution is, honestly, I don't even think about it anymore, which is sad. It's right now I'm concerned with these violent settlers who are going in and killing, people that friends of friends, basically. Like, fortunately, nobody that I directly know has been killed yet, but I have lots of friends there who knew Awdah. I have friends in lots of different towns who, I mean, their children are being killed, their people are being killed. In this town, Sebastia, where I've done a lot of reporting, I think last week, the military came in and officially seized 40% of their land to turn it into what is effectively a biblical Disneyland.
What?
And so there's just so much happening. I mean, I cannot emphasize enough that Smotrich is an incredibly effective legislator, frankly, and bureaucrat, and in a way that I think, like, I can't even think of a parallel in the U.S.
And this is someone who also has openly talked about like plans for a greater Israel. Obviously, that means full annexation of the West Bank. We know that Trump got however many millions of dollars from Miriam Adelson to effectively lobby for the annexation of the West Bank. You touched on something and that you just wrote about this week, but in terms of, was it a cousin of Sayfollah Musallet? Who is 15, being held in a military prison. And, you know, I think really, I think your piece highlighted the fact that we have been talking, or the mainstream news has been speaking about the hostages. And it truly, you cannot engage in an honest conversation about the hostages without either prizing one life over another, i.e. Israeli lives over Palestinian lives, if you're not actually going to talk about the hostages, the prisoners that Israel takes, and the conditions that they are in are absolutely wild. And so maybe you could just explain a little bit more about what you know, where they've been taken, how long they are held for. I mean, and we know that they regularly have imprisoned children, but can you just expand on that?
Yeah. So I think for the purposes of trying to make sense of the prison system in Israel, like, Israel, of course, has lots of laws that they use to charge Palestinians with all sorts of things. Like, they're not hesitant to use their laws against Palestinians. In addition to that, they have a number of different systems that they can use to lock people up indefinitely without having to charge them with anything. And the reason I bring up that they have laws is because these people who they're holding, and I'll explain that system in a second, but if they had charges against them, they would bring them. There's no reason not to bring those charges. So basically, they have two main ways of locking people up with no due process, no charges to fight. The first one is called the administrative detention. Administrative detention allows Israel to pick up anybody, man, woman, child, elderly, doesn't matter, and bring them into prison. And technically, they have secret evidence. Literally, they call it secret evidence that they show to the judge. And the judge then, I guess, like, winks and nods at, the prosecutor in that case. And they say, yes, this is a national security threat. They have to be in prison. But we can't release the evidence because that would threaten national security. And so that system of administrative detention, just to spell it out, what it means is they're arresting people. They never tell them what they're being charged with. They have no charge to fight. They don't get a day in court. And technically, administrative detention can last for 6 months, but then they can always just keep renewing it. So they have people that they have in prison for years and years and years who never even know what they're being charged with.
I mean, it's funny. October 7th was a pretext for so much, but it certainly wasn't a pretext for treating Palestinian prisoners this way. I mean, we sort of liken, or, October 7th is likened to 9/11, and I think it's apt when it comes to the security state and apparatus that was created after 9/11 here in the United States, like no suspension of laws and all this, and holding people indefinitely. But like, that's like how Israel's been doing. That's how they've been running. It is a country in a constant state of thinking that, and painting Palestinians as terrorists and that they are in war and under attack constantly. So anyway, that just to add on to that.
No, I mean, 100%. Like, these laws have been around for ages, since long before October 7th. And then the other one that they use is called the Unlawful Combatants Law, which is effectively the same thing, except they use it in Gaza instead of the West Bank. So I'm just totally blanking on his name, but the doctor, he was a pediatrician and the head of one of the biggest hospitals. He wrote an op-ed for the New York Times, basically begging for help. He is being held on unlawful combatant law, and again, he does not know what he's being charged with. Nobody knows what he's being charged with. His lawyer has no.
Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, according to your reporting. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Dr. Abu Safia. His lawyer can't fight the charge because there's no charge, and so it's just self-evident. Like, this man, he's a doctor and a human rights defender, and I think it's fair to say that he was targeted. A, because he was, treating Palestinians, but B, because he was raising awareness for what was happening. I mean, he was writing op-eds. He wrote 2 op-eds in the New York Times. So anyway, they have thousands and thousands of people who are being held without charges. They also have thousands of people who are being held on charges, to be clear. And I think it's safe to assume that some of them probably committed acts of violence. Now, whether or not a occupying force should be able to arrest people is a question I won't address for now. But just focusing on the people who they're not even charging with anything, they're being kept in what the Israeli human rights group Bezalel characterizes as a network of torture camps. And in these places, I mean, the guy who runs the prison system is Itamar Ben-Gvir, who I think people are familiar with.
You think Smotrich is bad? Gvir is just absolutely terrifying.
He literally, there's videos of him bragging and laughing about how he's starving Palestinian prisoners and lamenting that he's not able to just go and shoot them in the head himself. I mean, this is a guy who he's truly sadistic. He takes great pleasure in torturing Palestinian prisoners. This is something that I think is really important because there's been, those videos came out recently of the Israeli hostages in Gaza. And I will just say, I think those videos are horrifying. Those people are, obviously suffering in a huge way. And without getting into who's to blame for it, or, are they being starved, or is it the famine? You can just put all that aside for a second, because the big thing that you're hearing a lot of people say is, why doesn't Hamas let the Red Cross in to help those hostages, to check on them, to treat them, to feed them, whatever? Hamas has said the Red Cross can come in just as soon as you open up a humanitarian corridor and you stop doing airstrikes while you're distributing aid. Israel has not agreed to those conditions. So because of that, the Red Cross is not going to get in. Now, on the other side, and by the way, the Red Cross under international law has a right to check on prisoners. On October 7th, literally day of, Israel, I forget if it was a law or whatever it was, they passed some instant executive order, essentially, that barred the Red Cross from getting into their prisons. And they have extended it 20 separate times, as recently as Wednesday. They no longer are even sending information to the Red Cross about those prisoners. So
about the Palestinian prisoners.
Exactly, about the Palestinian prisoners. Mm-hmm. So what that means is the Palestinian prisoners, many of them are not facing a charge. They can't fight a charge. They're in prisons that are being overseen by somebody who's bragging about starving them. We have an unbelievable amount of testimony about the torture, the electrocution, being attacked by dogs, being starved.
Not just testimony, but your reporting reminded me of video, that we have video that was put out, I forgot, on some Israeli TV, which was security footage from, I believe, the Sardot detention center, where a man was taken in the back and clearly multiple soldiers are assaulting him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's just chilling. And that was something they're like, oh yeah, put that into the traumatized hurt category, because I'd forgotten, in your article and your reporting, just anyway, yeah. The things they subject their prisoners to is insane.
In that particular case, it's sort of unclear in the video if they're actually raping him, but at the very least, what we know, because the doctor said it, is that they sodomized him with a metal rod. And after that happened, Ben-Gvir, among other high-profile Israeli politicians, basically protested for the prison guards' right to do that, because they were, after that video came out, there was, an uproar among some people, and they went in to question those prison guards, and there was a literal riot to stop them from questioning those prison guards that was supported by the guy who runs the prison system. So these people are clearly being tortured. They're being starved. Over 70 of them have died. Last week, a 20-year-old just dropped dead. A healthy 20-year-old who'd been in prison for 3 months just dropped dead. We just found out about somebody who was being interrogated by the Shin Bet. He was handcuffed, and he died from falling from a significant height while handcuffed. So it's not that difficult to figure out what might have happened there. And the Red Cross is not allowed in. So it is a complete black hole. And so the reason I think that is so important to talk about, in addition to just the fact that like it's important in its own right, is because if you are somebody who feels great empathy for the hostages in Gaza and who sees those videos of them starving and thinks it's horrific, and you think that it's ridiculous that people who talk about ending the war or freeing Palestine don't also talk about the hostages, there is truly no reason why that exact same reasoning can't be carried over to these Palestinians in prison. And again, I'm just, for the sake of argument, I'm not even talking about the people who are being charged with crimes, even though they should also have rights. But for the sake of just talking about hostages, I mean, when I was in Hebron, I met somebody whose brother was a graffiti artist, and he had been spray painting pictures of martyrs in a refugee camp. I forget which one. The soldiers came looking for him to arrest him. They couldn't find him, so they arrested his dad, and they held his dad and said they were going to hold him until his son turned himself in. That's literally a hostage. That is a hostage situation.
Oh yeah.
And so just, it's the double standard. There's so many double standards, but
we've been asked to dehumanize Palestinians. We've been asked to prize Israeli lives over Palestinian lives over and over again. Israeli lives that the Israeli government itself does not care about. Israeli lives who are being used as a political pawn, and whose family members, the poor family members, have protested the treatment, the lack of engagement around a ceasefire from the Israeli government, knowing that their loved ones are precisely that, political pawns. So it's like, don't ask me to take their lives seriously when, Israel, the Israeli government does not take their lives seriously. Like, I'm not going to prize them over any other life that is being unjustly detained and tortured and on and on and on. Although, I mean, again, it's so ridiculous to be like, you're starving the Israeli hostages in a place that is starving. Like, what is the logic behind that? I did want to speak about it because two last things for you. This is wonderful, and thank you for taking the time. One of the groups, again, you mentioned doctors. We know that doctors have been, and humanitarian workers have been, assassinated, targeted, imprisoned, and tortured. And this week it is, again, journalists. The place in the world where the most journalists have been killed is in Gaza. We know foreign journalists are not allowed in, so they are Palestinian. And Gaza City, specifically the Al Jazeera bureau in Gaza City, was just targeted. 5 journalists killed. One of them, Anas al-Sharif, who was sort of, had a huge following. I've played his clips. This is one of those, like, I had to break down and cry moments. The IDF called him a Hamas militant, and just like, that's it, Hamas militant. The New York Times also basically was like, he was linked with Hamas. It's fine. You don't have to feel sad. We can suspend international law when it comes to the protection of journalists because he was Hamas. Just your reaction to these murders, and do you think they are connected? I've seen some people float the idea that they are connected to this, to what Israel now says they're going to do, which is fully reoccupy Gaza and likely move anyone who can survive in this, basically into what they're good at, as you mentioned, which are detention centers, torture camps.
I think you have to assume that killing the most prolific journalist in Gaza right before occupying Gaza City, where he was reporting from, is not a coincidence. They have been smearing this guy for months and months and months, and they put him on a literal kill list. And now they've killed, I think, 2 different people on that list. I do think, though, that there's another part of the story, which is that Israel is very good at flooding the zone, I think is what we call it in Trump world, right? They do so many of these horrific things that you are constantly having to contend with the latest one without being able to seek resolution on the last one. And in this particular case, I think what they've done very effectively is they've gotten all of us into debating whether or not he was actually affiliated with Hamas. I don't know if you've seen this, but there's like this screenshot floating around of a Telegram message that I've heard it's real, I've heard it's fake. I don't know the answer. The message is basically allegedly sent by Anas on October 7th, and it says something like, "Our heroes are still in there, killing and capturing the enemy." And that what we are now, like, there are probably millions of people debating whether or not it's real. Jesus. And what we're doing when we debate that is we're debating not whether or not it's okay to kill a journalist because he may be affiliated with Hamas, but whether or not he was affiliated with Hamas. So basically, we're accepting their framework that if he was in fact affiliated with Hamas, he was a legitimate military target. And so to me, like, I don't care if he was affiliated with Hamas or not. I from what I've seen, I don't think that he was, but he was very obviously a journalist. I mean, he was out every single day for almost 2 years reporting. So if he was affiliated with Hamas, if he celebrated on October 7th, none of those things make him a legitimate military target. And so now, instead of talking about the fact that Israel just targeted and murdered, 6 or 5 or 7 Al Jazeera journalists, a lot of people are debating whether or not he was in fact Hamas.
Right, exactly. Well, and it gives them, and it's a happy little distraction for everyone still trying to run cover for all of Israel's crimes, right? Yeah. That if we can focus on this or focus on the one starving child that had a pre-existing condition, and so the New York Times must issue a retraction, which proves the New York Times has been lying this whole time every time they actually report on all of the people starving. I mean, it is deliberate, to your point. This is part of the Hasbara. This is part of the propaganda machine. And it's like, also, Hamas is the government of Gaza. You interact with Hamas when you when you work, you know what I mean? When you get a job as a journalist, when you cover what's going on in Gaza. Like, that's literally how governments work. The idea that he was like part of the Hamas militant wing, shut up. I don't care. I don't care about that. That's not true. And also, like, the text message, I don't care. I literally don't care. Like, you cannot kill journalists like this. Yeah. And that's the principle. So it is all a distraction machine, the whole thing.
It's also just worth noting that Smotrich quite literally announced a couple months ago that Israel was officially targeting not just Hamas's military wing, but all of the infrastructure that holds up the Hamas government.
Of course.
And so what that means is every sanitation worker, every accountant, every doctor who works at a hospital is affiliated with the government. I mean, that is genocidal logic, is what it is. When you broaden out from just Hamas's military and government to now every civil servant who gets a municipal paycheck, you're giving yourself permission to massacre the entire strip. And I think that is why I'm like, I understand the impulse to refute these ridiculous allegations that he was a Hamas militant, because they are ridiculous allegations. I do think it's worth thinking about. I mean, Mohammed El-Kurd is the one who really writes about this the most. It's like, you don't have to be a perfect victim, right? Like, if he was in fact celebrating on October 7th, well, first of all, I think it's fair to say a lot of people in Israel have been celebrating the, destruction and suffering in Gaza this whole time. And none of those people should be legitimate military targets for that.
I mean, Jasper, when a child starves to death and they happen to have a pre-existing condition that is, by the way, related to their malnutrition, that is grounds enough for someone to not be a perfect victim if you're Palestinian. That's grounds enough. Oh, it's your own fault. You were born like that. Yeah. You were born like that in a completely besieged enclave known as Gaza, the place of the most populated and impoverished place on the face of the earth. Like this is so, yeah. Of course, the idea that there could ever be a perfect victim is ridiculous. I mean, you've got Madonna, however, now asking for Pope Leo to go to Gaza, which, you know, hey, there's a pretty good victim right there, because he will be attacked. I do think that he and Taylor Swift, who else should we throw in there? I don't know, maybe someone
into Gaza.
Yeah. I'm just like, who are the untouchable? Like, what's an untouchable?
Right.
You know, we see the way Chris Smalls gets treated, obviously, when he tries to go.
Yeah, we should get Taylor Swift in there. I think that's a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.